Hi everyone. This video is being created to try to help you strategize how to successfully pass a multiple choice question test. All right, sometimes called multiple guess tests. All right, what if I told you you have to take a test, and I'm going to hand you the test, and the test has all of the answers already on the sheet. Would you be happy? Well, that's exactly what a multiple choice test is, right? The answer is already there. Your work is to figure out which answer does the test creator want. Okay. We'll get into this a little bit later, but it's important to try to take the perspective of the test taker, if possible. But that's like high level stuff. So with most multiple choice questions, you're giving 4 options. You're giving a prompt and 4 choices. So the prompt is the question. Let's start there. Okay, let's start at the question. I do this. Okay, I do this. I'm in a hurry. If it's timed, I'm in a hurry. Let's say hypothetically, if I have 100 questions and 2 hours to do the test, I'm in a hurry. I'm worried that I'm going to not have enough time, so I have a little bit of anxiety, so I rush. So I've done this, okay? I've read halfway through the question and I go, I know the answer. And then I jump to look for the answer that I think I know. Do not do that. Do not do what I have done, okay? The most important thing is to slowly, carefully read the entire question. Don't stop. Catch yourself. If you're halfway through the question and you think, I know this answer, wait. Carefully read the rest of the question. Because sometimes you'll have a distractor. Sometimes distractors are test questions that seem plausible, but they're not the most correct answer. What you're looking for is the most correct answer. And sometimes, if you read half the question and jump to the selections, you could choose one that matches the first half of the question, but if you were to read the rest of the question, there is another answer that is more correct. And I'm saying that because there are times when there's test options that one is correct a little bit and one is much more correct. So you want to pick the best question. Okay? Now, what you want to do, so number 1, we're going to read the question slowly and thoroughly. And now we're going to pause. I'm not even going to look at the 4 choices first, okay? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause and I'm going to think in my own little head, do I know the answer? What's the answer to that question? And I try to think, do I know the answer? And if I think I know the answer, now I'm going to look at the 4 choices and I'm going to look for the question that matches up best with what the answer was in my head. You know, I should have started off with this, but I feel like I'm a little bit qualified to give this because when I got my PhD at Loyola, I ran a whole course called Becoming a Master Student, and the whole point was to help people do better in school. The whole point of this little discussion is to help you perform better on multiple choice questions. Here's the funny thing. Actually, as a professor, I think multiple choice questions are a very poor way to measure understanding the information. It's like the lowest rung, yet all of academics relies on it heavily. Professional certification things rely on it. It's what they like. I think that there's other ways. If you ever take research methods class with me, you'll see I don't even have a written test. I have an oral test for that one, where I ask you questions and I guide you in your answers. So if you're going a little wrong, I can say, no, not quite. Try a different way. That's suggested by a Russian psychologist named Vygotsky. And people perform much better in that setting than forced choice. Forced choice means you can't add more answers to the test. There's 4 options. You're given the prompt, the question, and 4 answers. So as part of that class, I developed these strategies and spent years trying to hone them to help you. Sometimes I would even suggest, this is especially the case with standardized tests. Sometimes, a lot of times, the test is more testing your ability to answer multiple choice questions rather than your knowledge of the information that's supposed to be being tested. It's stupid. I really dislike it. And it's the world we live in. Okay? So the whole point of this is to try to help you improve. If we were working out, like which muscles we're working on today, working on legs, working on abs, back, whatever, pecs. Okay, the muscles we're working on with this is test-taking muscles. I'm going to try to help you improve your ability to answer the multiple choice questions. And because, like I said, I known students that knew the material backwards and forwards, but were not good at the process of successfully answering multiple choice questions. I should have started the whole thing off with that, but I was excited and I dove into it. Okay, so that's the whole why you're watching this video, to try to become a better test taker. Maybe some of you don't need it. That's great. Maybe you don't need this video, but also, I've been a professor for 36 years. I've also picked up some additional tips. Even if you're already good at multiple choice, maybe some of these tips will help you. Okay, so like I said, I should have started off with all that, but I didn't. All right, so now back to flexing those muscles, doing the reps, okay? Number 1, read the question slowly and thoroughly. Relax, slow down, read it thoroughly. Don't look at the answers. Do I know the answer? Yes, I think I know the answer. Now look at the 4 choices and try to decide which of the 4 matches the answer in your head first. What if you just kind of know the answer? Well, pick the one that most matches what you think the right answer is. What if you have no clue? What if you don't know? That happens, okay? What if you have no clue? This is where we use the process of elimination. Okay, look at that. Look at the 4 choices. Right now, your chances of getting the answer correct just by blindly picking it are 25%, 1 out of 4, right? Less than a coin toss, right? If it costs a coin, I got heads and tails. Flip the coin, I'm going to guess heads. I have 1 out of 2 chances of getting that guess right without knowing. With the typical multiple choice with 4 questions, we're half that odds. We're at 25% rather than 50%. So, if I don't know the answer, what I want to do is I want to eliminate any possible incorrect answers. So I read the question slowly and carefully. I don't know the answer. I can't remember. I look at the 4 questions. I realize, wait a minute, this one's obviously wrong. That's a stupid response. I know that one's wrong. Okay, process of elimination. If I could eliminate that one, now we're down to 3 potential questions. Okay, we went from 25% probability of guessing the right answer to 33%. We went from 1 out of 4 to 1 out of 3. That's great. Let's say you can eliminate 2 of them. I know this one's not right, and this one doesn't sound right either. Okay, now we're down to 2. You are now up to a coin toss about guessing which one is the correct one. I really want to encourage you to go with your gut. When you're looking at them and you say, I can't remember, what does your gut say? Say I'm down to 2 or I'm down to 3 potential answers. What does your gut say? Listen to down here. What does your intuition say? What feels right? What does your gut say? And go with that. Now, the tests vary a little. Most tests allow you to go back and change answers. Excuse me. This is a very tricky thing, okay? Later in the test, should you go back and change the answers? What research suggests is that when you don't know and you're guessing versus going back and changing it, I think it's 60 to 70% of the time you're better off, and it leans towards the 70% of the time. Your first gut question, your hunch that you felt was right, is correct. Sometimes people get distracted later on by other questions and go back and change it. Like I said, if you're guessing, about 70% of the time, it's going to be correct, as opposed to going back and changing it. There's one exception to this, okay? The one exception is if in a later question you get specific information that clearly, exactly, specifically changes your mind about what the answer is to the other one, then certainly do that. But that's a different question. But if you're going back and now you're going to guess again, and you don't have additional information from later, because sometimes that happens. Later on in the test, they ask a question. Those are bad test writers, right? But that tells you something that would help you answer the earlier one. If that's the case, go back and change it. But if you've made your best hunch and there's no additional information from other items, stick with your first answer. Like I said, about 70% of the time, if I compare my first hunch and how I answer it, first eliminating all ones I know are wrong, and now I'm going to guess what I think is the best answer, versus going back and looking at the one I guessed on with my best hunch and changing it, 70% of the time the first one was correct. Those are better odds. So stick with your hunch unless specific additional information comes out later in the test. Okay? Here's some things that are just sort of, I don't know, what do we call them? Academic myths or guidelines. I tell you in general what some of the experts say as far as tests. That's that watch out for what's called absolute terms, like always, never, all, or none. Most of the time, but not always, most of the time, those are not correct. They're often incorrect because there's, you can always think of exceptions. So if you have no clue, no hunch, and you see the word always, never, the best chance might to go if it's an absolute statement like that, to say that that is not a correct answer, and helping you eliminate it. So now we want to get it eliminated down to that most correct answer. Okay. Look for qualifiers. Some other guidelines suggested are to look for qualifier. Qualifiers are words like usually, most, often. If you have no idea what the answer is, and there's one that is absolute, always, and an absolute statement, another one qualifier like usually, most, the guidelines suggest that the ones that have qualifiers are probably more likely to be the correct answer. Remember, it's always a situation of most correct answer, because a lot of times you can look and see. I'm really not very organized today. I'm sorry. I needed a third cup of coffee. One thing I should have mentioned while you read the question, you get the answer in your head, you look at the questions. I really should have emphasized this. I'm emphasizing it now. This is really, really important. Before you mark your answer, read all 4 of the answers. Because one could be true, true-ish, true, but 4 was, oh, heck yeah, true. If you went with, A sounds reasonable, and stop reading, you won't get to the 4 that says, heck yes, that's true. That is clearly a stronger statement of truth than the first one. This is the issue of the most correct. I can't tell you how many years I've had students want to argue me. Well, I have something that's partially true or the spot on correct answer, and the students want to argue, well, this one has some truth in it. Well, it has some truth in it, but you're looking for the most truthful answer. Sorry, I'm a little bit of that Canadian wildfires kicking off my asthma. Please excuse me. So we want the best, we want to pick the answer that the test writer thought was the most correct answer. And it's really important to read all the responses before you determine that. Like I said, you have the answer in your head. Look for, out of the 4, which one most matches that. Don't have the answer in your head. Eliminate ones you know are wrong. Look what's left. Out of the remaining ones, are there any that have absolute phrases? Always, never. And maybe there's one that is absolute and one that says sometimes and usually. I suggest go with the qualifier one rather than the absolute one. Unless you have a hunch, if you have a hunch. And also that, the absolute one, there could be an item in there that is an absolute. Don't take the statement on absolutes in an absolute manner, okay? Is that hypocrisy or integrity? I don't know. But, you could think of a situation where there isn't always, but usually, these are rule of thumbs, okay? Guidelines, rule of thumb. All right, I don't know what's going on with my camera. Sorry about that. Sorry. All right. So other guidelines suggest being careful about all of the above or none of the above. Clearly, what matters is who wrote the test and how good they are. Sometimes, just hypothetically, with professional certification tests, first of all, I want to say it's really hard to write really good test questions. The whole point of a test question is, I'm trying to determine, do you know this material? Right? That is very difficult to do. And a lot of professional organizations, it's a craft and it's very difficult. I could spend a whole hour on what's a bad test question. A lot of professional organizations for certification tests and such will have the questions written by people for credit, for continuing education credits. Someone that has no experience, they're a professional in their field and they know their field. They know whatever their field is. They do not know how to write an accurate, specific test question. So sometimes test questions can be written very poorly and it make it there's times I took a test and I knew the material like the back of my hand, and I looked at the question and I thought, I know everything about this, what they're asking about, but I don't know which question they want me to answer correctly. Okay, so that's sort of a high level. We have different levels that we want to go with this, and different levels we want to think about this. All right. But one of the high level ones to think about a little bit is some empathy. What was the perspective or the agenda of the person who wrote this question and who decided what the right answer is? Let me give you a hypothetical. I'm not supposed to talk about specific content from a test, but I won't mention what certification it was, okay? But a certification test that I took, and I don't mean to go sidetrack down here, okay? But let me just share something. I've been a psychologist and a counselor for 36 years. One of my opinions is that a lot of times ethics codes are written by people who are counselors or who are recovery support specialists, who are psychologists. A lot of times the ideal of an ethics code would be to guide people to function at the highest ethical level. That would be the ideal. The truth of the matter is like, let's look at it this way. Psychology, American Psychological Association Ethics Code says that I, as a psychologist, and I hope this isn't too prurient of an example for you, a blue example, says I am not to engage in sexual activities with my clients. Okay? It says it. Psychologists do not engage with current clients in sexual activity with current clients. They can engage in sexual activity if it's been 5 years since they stopped providing counseling to the person. First of all, I think that's messed up. All right, I really disagree with that. Why? Why did they include a 5-year window there? Why? Do things magically change after 5 years? If I'm your psychologist and I give therapy to you and I see you for 6 years and we stop doing therapy and I run into you 5 years later, your whole image in your mind of me is as the all-powerful psychologist. Think about it this way. Do you ever run into like a elementary school teacher from when you were little? They still have an aura of power to them, don't they? See that? Like, there's Mrs. Owens. Oh my gosh. You feel awe and respect unless you didn't like them. So think about that. For an elementary school teacher, that's been decades for most of us since we've had them. Yet they're still. So anyway, the whole point of this example is, why? Why did they say within 5 years? My opinion is, a lot of times ethics codes are written so the professionals can cover their ass. It's funny because I think with counseling, I think it's 3 years. They have, evidently, it's the American Counseling Association, I believe it's 3 years. You can't be sexually involved with someone until 3 years after you've had your last service delivery with them. All right. So, because the whole point is, like, if I were having sex with someone who was my client, and let's say we discontinued service, and now that I could lose my psychology license for that. Okay, so knowing that full well, okay, my opinion is to provide the best. What should the ethics code be? It should be psychologists do not have sex with clients or former clients. Period. Right? So I'm taking this test for a professional certification. And the question is, what is the role of an ethics code? I know what the answer is. The answer is to CYA, cover the ass of the people in the profession so that they can prevent being sued, to limit their liability in being sued. I know that from, maybe I'm jaded and cynical. I know this from years and years and years. I look, guess what what number A question is? It says, is a defensive measure to prevent being sued. I don't have to go any further, right? I don't have to go any further. That's what the answer was in my head. When I read the question, that was the answer in my head. Okay? I forget what B and C were. And then the D question was, to ensure the highest quality and ethical delivery of counseling services. Okay. I know what the real answer was A. Now what I do is I think a little bit about the perspective of who wrote this test, and who, more importantly than who wrote this question, is who decides what the right answer is. Now in this situation, I don't think the people that wrote this question are as jaded and cynical as I. Maybe they haven't done counseling long enough. But so I read that and I go, I know that A is right. It's to cover their ass. But I know the answer they think is right is to ensure the highest level of ethical conduct in clinical work. I knew that was the answer that they thought was right. Sorry about that. I'm going to mute my phone. I'm really sorry. So, but you see, that's hard to do sometimes. But think about this then. So if you ever are really stuck, think about the perspective of the person who's writing the test and grading the test, and what would they think is the right answer. Because sometimes what your real world answer is, that you've known, you've experienced in your life, might be different than the answer they're looking for. This is high level stuff, but it's good to think about, especially if you're stuck, okay? Think about what would be the, like, if you were at a cocktail party and chit-chatting with someone and they're a representative of this group, what's the answer they would like to hear? What's the one that pats them on the back and affirms them, okay? I know this is high level stuff, but if you're really stuck, it's one to keep in mind, especially if you know, it could very well be that you sit there and look at, and it was so, I'm telling you, it hurt to not answer to cover their ass. Because I feel strongly about it, as you can tell, but that's not the answer they were looking for. So even though I feel strongly that my answer was correct and more correct than theirs, they're the ones that have the power to decide which is the correct answer. And what, am I going to make a point here and say what I know is right and it'll feel good to answer the question and then not pass the test? No, we want to pass the test. The test is important. So also, just so you know, sometimes test makers will throw in what they call distractors, seemingly correct answers that are wrong to distract you from the right answer. Be careful about them. Don't get pulled into over-analyzing some. In general, the rule is to go with your gut and go with your hunch, and don't get into over-analyzing things too much, especially given whatever the time limit is for the test. I've had students that just get paralyzed and get stuck. They don't know the answer and they freeze. And let's say it's a half-hour test. They spend 15 minutes staring at that one question. Don't do that. Move on. Move on. It's okay. The worst thing would be to run out of time when there were easy questions for you later on. You're not going to get all of the answers right? A good test has what, I'm not going to go into this whole theory called item response theory related to this. A good test wants variability. A good test wants an item on that test that maybe only 1 in 100 people will get. They're just, a good test wants variability in responses. Don't spend half your time on a question that you're not going to get. And sometimes sitting there staring at it, I know it's hard because people have test anxiety. Sitting there, and then the anxiety can build up. And you can get paralyzed with the anxiety of, I don't know the question to this. Oh my gosh, I'm not going to pass this test. Move on. Okay, move on. Also, there's a comfort in now you find a question that's easier to answer, that you know what answer they're looking for. That can give a confidence and a rhythm to it. But don't get frozen, okay? Don't get frozen. Don't overanalyze, and make sure that you keep moving on. Most tests like that we're talking about here, you would not be penalized for wrong answers. There's some where getting an answer wrong hurts you more than leaving it blank. Do not leave it blank. Even if you just go with a hunch and you read the question thoroughly, you pause, you don't know the answer, you look at the 4 answers, you can't eliminate any of them. Just go with you don't see any absolutes or seemingly trick questions. Answer the question to the best of your ability and move on. Okay, you're still 1 in 4 chance of getting it right. That's better than running out of time and leaving it blank. Does not help you. It's better to, even if, let's say, I don't know, you totally run out of time. There's 10 questions left and you have 30 seconds. Just clicking through them and randomly answer them, even without reading the question, is a better strategy if you run out of time, because there's 1 in 4 chance you'll get it right. Okay. So that time management's critical. I just can't even tell you how important it is, because you're not going to, and I know a lot of people have test anxiety. I've taken some very high stake tests. I know that anxiety sometimes can paralyze people. You have to just brush off and move on. Just tell yourself, I don't know this one. I'll guess. Maybe I'll come back and get information on another question, but it's okay. I'm not going to know all of the answers. And I don't need to know all of the answers to pass this test. All right, like I said, a really good test they'll have one item that only 1 out of 100 get. So the time management and the anxiety management is critical. Don't be afraid to guess. Do not leave it blank. Your guess, and the guess is better. Like I said, 1 in 4. That's better than nothing. I hope. Don't. Like I said, if you did guess, I'm just repeating myself now. Maybe that means I need to stop the video. If you go back and review the ones you've guessed, only change them if you got specific information from later questions that guided you to the correct answer. Then you can change it. Otherwise, leave your first guess, your hunch-based guess as it was. 70% chance that's right as opposed to changing it. Changing it when you don't have additional information from other items drops it from 70% to 30%. Okay, I hope this helped. Like I said, I don't like the system. This is the world we live in, where so much pressure is based on a multiple choice standardized test. A lot of them are written poorly. Even if you know the information, it's hard to pass them sometimes, but it's just what we got to deal with, okay? As much as you can figure out a way to manage the anxiety, the better. If you have a test and if you have some accommodations available for that test, if it means more additional time, whatever, please embrace those accommodations. They're there to help you succeed. I hope this helped. Also, if you have a chance to practice as much as possible, okay? If you can get examples of practice exams or practice questions, writing questions like the ones from the material that you'll be tested on. So when I took my GRE, that's the graduate version of the ACT. First time I took it, I scored in the 82 percentile. So that means that I was in the top 18%, and 82% of the people that took that test were below me. That was fine for getting into my master's degree. Getting into a PhD was a different story. So I knew so I got a bunch of example GRE tests. Luckily, I was doing my internship in Florida for my master's degree, so I moved somewhere where I didn't know anyone. So I had I had a lot of open time on my calendar. I knew there I needed to work on the math, knowing what your weaknesses are as far as the areas go. So once a night I would do a math. It's just like the ACT. A math test would take 20 minutes. So I would time myself. I would take one math test, and then 20 minutes. Then I would grade it. I had study guide books that helped me. I graded it and see where I was wrong. Then once a week I sat down and I took a full 4-hour practice GRE on my own. I did that for 6 months. Okay. I don't mean to go too much into detail here, but there's a difference between what they call an aptitude and an achievement test. An achievement test is supposed to measure what you know. An aptitude test is not supposed to measure what you know. It's supposed to measure your ability to learn. All right? The ACT and the GRE are theoretically aptitude tests. They're supposedly not measuring what you learned. They're measuring your underlying intelligence, supposedly, and your ability to learn, which is BS, all right? What they're really measuring is test-taking strategies and familiarity with the process of taking tests. So after 6 months in those practice GREs, it got to the point where the first time I did a 4-hour GRE, I was exhausted. I had to go home and take a nap. I would sit at the library in the University of Florida in Gainesville and take the test in a little cubicle, a little Caro. I have to go home and take a nap. By the end, doing that once a week, one time I thought, I'm going to take a little coffee break and I'm going to do another one. And I did. I went and did another GRE that day, 2 in one day, like lifting those muscles, okay? So then when I went to take the GRE for my, to get into a PhD program, then when I took it that second time, I scored at the 98th percentile. So, first of all, think about how this undermines the whole point of supposedly aptitude tests. So I was at 82 percentile here, meaning there were 82% of the people below me. I spent 6 months studying and practicing those muscles and lifting those muscles and practicing multiple choice questions, multiple guess questions. 6 months later, I'm at the 98th percentile, meaning 98% of the people were below me, only 2% above me. That makes no sense. In 6 months, did my natural ability to learn automatically increase? No. It's not an aptitude test. It's a test that measures test-taking ability and strategies and those muscles. The good news is there's things you can do, like I've talked about here, to improve those muscles and to have strategies that will help you. That one of the biggest one is whatever the test is, if you have the chance to practice, even if you and friends create, not fake, I mean, they're questions you're writing. You probably know as much as some of the people writing the questions. Write practice questions. Review the material and look at the material and think, how would that look like as a multiple choice question? In your head even, to think, for this thing I'm looking at right here, well, how would that appear as a multiple choice question? And what would be the right answer? And what would be the right question getting at that answer? So the good news is there are strategies you can use that I talked about here. And the biggest one is practice if possible. Even if it's making up your own questions from the material you have that you know that the test will be based on. All right. I hope this helps. I will try to stay away from going. I could spend another 2 hours on how screwed up standardized tests are and how much emphasis we based on standardized tests. And it's not measuring. In psychometrics called validity. They're not measuring what they say they measure. They're not. They're measuring test-taking ability and familiarity with tests and lack of anxiety on test-taking and your ability to strategize in it. So the good news is some of that's within your control. I hope this helped. I hope I didn't go on too long with examples. The point is there are things you can do, and practice is number one. Slowing down. If you have real anxiety, try to figure out what are the tools you have for dealing with test anxiety, okay? Whatever it is. When I went to law school, I think my iPad's dying. It's time to end the video. I went to law school at one time. You know what I did? I studied in the classroom where the test was going to be, just because I wanted to feel it was the same setting I was studying as where I would take the test. Anyway, good luck. I hope this helped at all. And I just want to emphasize there's things you can do to help increase the chances that you can pass what the test that you're facing. Okay. All right. Dr. Paul checking out, and good luck.